Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest.
Bibbidi Swasher Vulcan Clop Slava
Yes, and to you as well, Jonathan.
Babada Guru Babada.
I feel like you're trying to tell me something, but it's all hazy. It's coming in as if you were in some sort of altered state.
Well,
Maybe not all there in the head.
that's an average Tuesday for me.
Is it a Tuesday, though?
Sure. Why not? Time can both be present and going back in time, right?
Yeah. Especially here in Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I love Des Moines.
Des Moines, Canada, and the French Alps is the best time of the best place to be.
Yeah, and when they built that Great Wall, very fun.
The Koreans did that, right?
Yeah. But when the Celts were coming in to conquer the Baltic Sea.
I love 1969.
Yeah,
It's a good year.
yeah, it's a good vintage. A lot of bloodshed that year.
Well, it was 1969, the year for bloodshed. As our great prophet,
Genghis Khan.
the son of Phillip K. Dick. Yes.
Genghis Khan. Yes.
Genghis Khan.
Yeah, a wonderful poet
Indeed.
from the Western ways.
Yeah, the Gothic poet from the Western ways, Genghis Khan, son of Philip K. Dick,
and his brother,
Hitler.
Okay,
That's actually on point. We'll get to it later.
I don't know that because I'm not done with the story, but I believe you.
Well, now the story with the author, because we'll get to it. It's fine.
Okay,
I'll explain everything. I'll send you a note and a pack of cigarettes.
all right. Only if the cigarettes are disintegrating.
Of course.
Well,
Well, we've confused everybody, including ourselves.
yeah. Why don't you give us a quick, just 2-sentence context for why we're confused? Because I only became unconfused just before I hit record. So let's start with that.
Sure. We're reading Philip K. Dick's UBIK, a novel that questions reality in some way. Well, not in some way.
In every way.
In every way. And it's one of his more famous novels.
Really?
And the funny thing about PKD, and we'll do a little bio on him in a little bit here. The funny thing about Philip K. Dick is he was a prolific writer, but not really respected or taken seriously during his lifetime. After his death, a few movies, starting with Blade Runner, were made by Hollywood. But even Blade Runner wasn't a success until maybe 10 years later. It caught on VHS, and people started watching it and going, oh, this guy has something interesting to say. They discovered Philip K. Dick through the lens of Ridley Scott. And then more and more people started picking his books up. More movies were made from his works, Minority Report, A Scanner Darkly, and one or two more. Oh, The Man in the High Castle, my Hitler joke. The Man in the High Castle is a novella by him.
He wrote that?
He wrote that. That's Philip K. Dick.
Oh.
So Germany wins. In this subjective reality, Germany wins and conquers the U.S. And how does that look like? That's why we're talking all crazy, because in this book, the characters experience altered states or realities where they don't know what's real and what's not and whether they're dead or alive. That's why we're talking like crazy people.
Or normal people for the world of UBIK.
Exactly. This is not a book that I would recommend anybody to read as their first Philip K. Dick book.
Why not?
Most people are like you. When they come to this sort of work, unless they are totally 100% into transgressive, weird kind of stuff, if that's not their first go-to when they're picking up a book, they're going to be lost, like you were lost for a little bit. A Scanner Darkly, The Man in the High Castle, those two would be the ones I would say, like, hey, read this. This is Philip K. Dick. A lot more easy-flowing narratives, but you still get the transgressive elements, you get the subjective elements, you get alternate realities, alternate universes, and it's fun. And that's what he's known for. Philip K. Dick is known for featuring
Fun.
weird shit, fun in his books. But you got to understand, this guy worked days, sold his works to pulp magazines and to science fiction magazines in the 50s, which didn't pay a lot. And he worked days and wrote nights and did a lot of drugs.
Didn't we have a throwaway episode where we tried to discuss the state of the world kind of through his eyes?
Yeah, because we read Blade Runner or
Yeah.
Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. And that's another good one. That's a good one to start with, too. I guess 3 books, I would say. If you're totally new to this genre and you heard the name Philip K. Dick and you're thinking, hey, what the hell should I read by this guy? In order of importance or ease of how easily you can grasp it, per Slava, Scanner Darkly, The Man in the High Castle, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep.
Yeah, I'm looking back at our schedule here. That was episode 19 and 20. Drew Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. Afterward, we did a burner episode trying to discuss what is real and realized that the episode was horrible, which is why we didn't release it. And secondly, it was also very off-brand. This all makes a little more sense, maybe.
He's an interesting fellow, and I want to save discussing him more in depth beyond our little bio that we do here, because he had a few different views that he took on reality and the nature of it, which I think would be interesting to touch upon. Again, we didn't release that episode for a reason, because this is not a philosophy podcast. But as consumers of these type of books, it'll be interesting to volley back and forth.
Sounds good. All right, adventurers, make sure you smash that subscribe button so that you never miss a side quest.
So we'll begin with giving the people a little bio of Philip K. Dick, because it's been a while since we covered him. Philip Kindred Dick, also known as PKD, was an American science fiction writer born on December 16th, 1928, in my hometown, Chicago. He authored 44 novels and approximately 121 short stories. The nature of reality perception, human nature, and identity were some of the varied philosophical and social questions that his fiction explored. His stories often featured characters struggling against elements such as governments and altered states of consciousness. After years of drug abuse and mystical experiences in 1974, Dick's work started addressing issues of theology, metaphysics, and the nature of reality. He passed away in 1982 in Santa Ana, California, at the age of 53, due to complications from a stroke. He is considered one of the most significant figures in 20th century science fiction. The book that we're discussing is set in 1992, and humans have colonized the moon, and many people have psychic powers. Joe Chip is a technician working for the Runstetter Associates Company, an organization that employs what are called inertials to cancel out the abilities of telepaths and precogs so their clients' privacy is protected. The organization is run by Glenn Runstetter, who is assisted by his deceased wife, Ella, who is kept in a state of half-life, which is a form of cryonic suspension which allows the deceased limited consciousness and ability to communicate with the so-called real world. While communicating with Ella, Runstetter discovers that her consciousness is being invaded by another half-lifer named Jory Miller. The novel has a noir and detective fiction feel, as Joe Chip stands in for the detective who may be caught in a dangerous mystery. It is also worth noting that the author frequently uses unfamiliar jargon like psi, inertial, and papapot, a term associated with drug use. This is a common literary technique used throughout PKD's works. The author rarely explains these terms explicitly, forcing the reader to discern their meaning through contextual clues. This effect is akin to being dropped into an unfamiliar culture or community. I'm confident that Philip K. Dick did this to confuse the author and make him feel just like the characters we're about to discuss feel in this novel. So we have Glenn Runstetter, the CEO of Runstetter Associates. He's one of our protagonists. We have Joe Chip, He works as a technician for Glenn Runciter, testing possible anti-Psi's abilities. Those are people who can counter attacks by the Psis or the Psis, who can read minds and are used as a form of corporate espionage. He is disheveled and never has any money. We also have Pat Conley, who is a telepath whose abilities are unlike anything Runciter's people have ever seen. She can cause matter and people to revert to an earlier state of being. We have Jory, who is the main antagonist of the novel. He is young, scrawny, and stored at the Meritorium in Half-Life along with Runciter's wife. Jory is very powerful and possesses the ability to take over other Half-Lifers' frequencies and manipulate them.
Yeah, there's not a robust cast in terms of quantity, but there is. I would say it's robust in terms of the types of people or the types of characters that we spend time with. Some of them are throwaway, like Wendy and most of the crew that's connected with earlier on in the story.
Right.
But I did like Joe's issues of never having any money. And I don't feel like I know exactly why he doesn't always have money.
He spends it on drugs.
Okay. He made a note in the first half, because that's as far as I am right now, about just spending it on, what did he call it? Common pleasantries or like normal somethings. But it was when he was buying a terrible cup of coffee, like a year-old cup of coffee. And I was like, oh, maybe he just like doesn't budget his money.
He doesn't.
Well, sure. He can't even open his friggin' door. So that was a fun plot element.
Joe and Runciter are probably my favorite characters. Runciter primarily because he's just this character that's such a larger-than-life type of dude.
Yeah.
Right? He's like 80 years old, but you couldn't tell because he has organs that have been altered.
Yeah.
So he has vitality and life. And his 20-year-old wife, and you don't know why she's 20. I mean, you know why she's 20 because that's her age. But how a 20-year-old and the 80-year-old are together. So it seems like she died a while ago, probably when they were both young. And he's kept her in Half-Life for an extended amount of time. And she begged him or demanded of him that he keep her in Half-Life so she can make decisions for their company. And their company exists to counter corporate espionage. From the beginning, this picture of Runciter that you get as a reader is this larger-than-life dude. And then he has this motley crew of secretaries and inertials and technicians and recruiters who are working for him. And these are the people that we kind of take a ride with right away in chapter 1. It starts out with a punch. There's no introduction. You're with Runciter. He's talking with Ella. There's a inertial who went missing. And then you're with Joe Chip and Gigi Abrams. And then you got this woman, Pat, who we will discover in the second part of the book is not who she seems.
She struck me. So when we first meet Pat, I'm like, oh, this person's going to clearly be notable for the story. Then she just kind of gets lost in the story and disappears for, I want to say it's 5 chapters, and I'm only 9 chapters in of 17 chapters, like, which is a large percentage of time. She gets referenced, but it's good to know that she's going to come back into play, because I was like, I would be really surprised if it was like, hey, she has this really unique power. Then she just disappears.
No, she comes back. She plays a big role, but she's not there for a reason. I won't spoil it for you because I want you to read it. She's not there for a reason. She's not mentioned in the book for a reason. And that reason stems from what I mentioned earlier. Part of Dick's motive here is to confuse the reader so he or she feels just as disoriented as the characters that they're reading about.
Yeah.
But she comes back. Pat comes back in full force, like you've seen her work her magic, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a fine moment to mention then. Before the episode started, I was telling Slava how I'm again, only 9 chapters into this book, And I can tell that this book will make so much more sense on a second and third read through, but on this first read through, which led to, our opener this time, I have no idea what's going on, and honestly don't care because I don't know what's going on. Because when you don't know what's going on, you don't have skin in the game, at minimum emotional skin in the game. And then Slava told me that I'm supposed to be confused, and I was like, okay, well, that's happening, so that's good.
This comes back to something that I don't want to belabor, but I think it's worth underscoring again. This is a particular genre by a particular author, and if this is not your cup of tea, you won't care. But coming into this, if you are a dedicated Philip K. Dick fan and you like weird fiction, you're gonna love being confused. You want to go down that rabbit trail like Alice on a acid trip. But if you're coming into this thinking that you're gonna have a structured plot with structured characters and exposition and a story, you won't be satisfied.
Sure. Which is a good note that maybe you want to mention on the front end of this book. If someone's like, oh, I've heard of it, maybe I'll give it a whatever. But anyhow, that's for the audience.
Whatever. What was your first impression of Half-Life? Because that's the first thing you get introduced to. Something's missing, somebody's missing, and a guy flies to Switzerland and wakes up a dead wife and starts talking to her subconscious.
I honestly think that that's something that we will try to move toward as a society. And I don't say that as in the terms that it's going to be a good thing, but with the state of even AI in the last 2 years, where if you and I used an AI for 6 months, it could really, really, really speak almost exactly like us, and people are already testing these things. So, maybe it won't be Half-Life that we see first, but it'll be something similar. All that to say, I think it's weird per your mention of the genre, which is fine. I think it's also unique. It strikes me as something similar to The Matrix, where you've got a bunch of people, their brains are plugged in, although it's not just a brain, their full bodies are there. But this idea of tapping into one's soul, if you will, it's, referred to as a subconscious here, but so you can engage in conversation and connection with that being, even though their body has disintegrated, which is it's something to just unravel and toy with, which is what it feels like he does here. So it's weird to me. I also don't know if I am fully settled on this term Half-Life. I get it, but I'm like, I wonder if there's a better word that would make more sense. I also took note that in the story they mentioned that burial is barbaric, and so it's like, oh, society has advanced in a direction, whether or not that's a good direction, but it's a direction. So yeah, because I think due to the fact that I'm only halfway through the story still, it still strikes me as like, oh, well, this is still weird. Not in a bad way, but just in general.
What you're referring to is Herbert Schoenheit von Vogelsang. He says that Half-Life is moral and good, and burial is barbaric. But as Runster is talking to his wife, knowing that every time he wakes her up, he loses a bit of her, because she's in this state with other Half-Lifers kind of floating in whatever the hell they are. When they get revived, a part of them dies a little bit more. And that's why he hasn't seen her in 3 years, because he doesn't want to wake her up unless it's very important. He thinks, is this really better? Isn't it better when everything just ends and you know that it's final?
Right.
And that's the first question of somebody questioning reality and somebody questioning the way things are done around them in this book. Runser is the one who begins to be like, well, do we really know what's going on? Do we know what we're doing?
Mm-hmm.
And his is more a rhetorical kind of philosophical question. And then when shit hits the fan, those questions become existential, because the characters are like, I don't know if I'm alive or dead anymore.
That's an interesting observation. And this is exactly to my point earlier, that this strikes me as the type of novel or story that really is only pieced together on a second, third, fourth read through, and slowing down and tasting each of the plot points, similar to something like Christopher Nolan's first movie, Memento, where you're like, what the hell is going on? It's not bad by any means. It leaves the audience going, I think that was good, but they go and watch it again, right? Like, and they go, oh, this and this. Oh, yeah. And then they wait 5 years and they watch it again. They're like, oh, yeah. I didn't notice that on the second watch through.
Yeah, what's most profound about Memento is the direction of the narrative. So the black and white scenes go in one direction and the color scenes go in a different direction. So they meet in the beginning and the end. Because I watched Nolan explain this in an interview. And I watched Memento 3 or 4 times and I thought it was good each time. And yes, I got more of the story the second and third time.
Yeah.
But when he explained that it's literally a circle, there's 2 timelines. Color goes one way, black and white goes the opposite way, and then they meet at the corners, if you will, when time bends. But that's the way he described it, and that was very profound. I was like, oh, wow. He took the time to build a story and a narrative in a world where that made sense, but it confused the shit out of the audience because the main character of Memento, he's confused as hell. So you're supposed to feel what he's feeling.
Right.
And that's why Phillip K. Dick in this book did an amazing job of pulling you in and confusing the shit out of you.
People who live on this level and think at this depth, like PKD and Nolan, yes, it is meant to confuse. But to me, it's really more of an invitation to think more abstractly.
Now, the confusion is a tool. It's a hook to reel you in and to confuse you. And by confusing you, he's peeling back this onion, and that's where the invitation comes in because you're immersed in the world that this person has built. Yes, it's an invitation for dialogue, but the confusion of the reader is the mechanism by which he starts the dialogue because he's talking to you through his story, and by confusing you, he goes, see, this is what I'm trying to say. You can't really know for sure if anything is real. Now, we won't get into debating that or refuting that in this episode, but I think that's what Dick is doing here.
Yeah, I would say that's a fair statement.
Yeah, there's another thing that's going on here too, and it's one of the themes. The idea of privacy. It seems to jump out right away. That's why I want to bring it up here, because in chapter 2, it seems that the theme of privacy is established. You know, Herbert, one of the other main antagonists here, is worrying that prudence organizations like Run-Sitters lie to him that there are telepaths in his office. So the whole espionage, the corporate espionage angle of this is people use telepaths to find out secrets of other organizations and then either extort them or steal their ideas. And that's why they need these inertials that Run-Sitter offers to figure out if there are telepaths at somebody's offices, who they are, how they infiltrated them, and to protect the privacy and the secrets of the employees, of the shareholders, of the stockholders, all that stuff. The point I'm making, this book was written, let's find out when this book was written. Can you look that up when I'm talking?
Yep.
Whenever this book was written, Phillip K. Dick was already talking about privacy issues.
1969.
1969. Ooh, that's weird.
Yeah, it is, because that's your jargon that you used at the beginning.
Yeah.
Did you go back in time to make this moment forgotten, but you actually planted it back then so that then we would have this moment?
Well, if you see the woman sitting behind me, her name is Pat. So
you didn't do it, but you...
I didn't do it, but she just needed a job. She came by the house and said, hey, Mr. Slava, can I get a job? And I was like, sure, what do you do?
Jingled her bazongas at you and said, here's a quarter?
Well, no, I'm married, so she didn't jingle anything at me, but, you know, she did change the past.
I'm just quoting the book, bud. That's all I'm doing here.
Yeah, and hold on, a side quest on Joe Chips and her sexual understanding. I think Pat is manipulating everything. And her getting naked in front of him and taking a shower at his house, that didn't strike me as sexual. That just struck me as either a power move or a super just F you That's her just messing with him. Even though she might pay for his bills and she lives with him, we never get explicit confirmation that they have any sort of relationship. Now, in one reality, and I hope not spoiling too much for you, in one reality, it's alluded they're married, but we still don't know if that's Pat.
No, that happened earlier, that happened in the first half.
Fine, good. But we really don't know if that is reality, or Pat has changed the past in order for them to have these memories that they're married. Nonetheless, the book is written in 1969. Cold War, there are fears of privacy. The Russians are spying, the Russians are coming, commies in, Hollywood. Everybody's up in arms. From my little understanding, from my little read of that era, everybody's afraid. But we don't have the privacy issues or the privacy fears that we have today. It's interesting to me that Philip K. Dick was thinking about these things long before they were even possible. And this is why I love transgressive, speculative, sci-fi fiction, because it takes a thing and then it pushes it to, whether they do this correctly or not is up for debate, but the author takes it to its logical conclusion. And a lot of times, I think they're right. But they take this thing, whatever that is, a technology, an idea, a philosophy, and they push it to its logical conclusions and then present the story to you and go, see? Well, this is what happens. Microtransactions. Like, these poor bastards have to have a nickel for the coffee and 25 cents for the shower, 5 cents to leave the apartment, 5 cents to come back in, even if you're just going down the hallway. I don't know what was in Dick's head, but that he captured the absurdity of microtransactions the way he did without even hearing that word, that's something.
This provokes a question, and you can tell me whether or not you want to go down this. You said he was heavy on drugs, or he did a lot of drugs, right?
Yeah, methamphetamines mostly, or I can't even speak the right language.
Uppers?
A lot of uppers.
I've never done drugs at the capacity that a lot of people that I've met throughout life have who do drugs. Not that everyone does drugs. But is there a spirit of the age that is aware of the direction of technology and where it's going to go? And if there is, then is it aware of other things in terms of where it also wants to go? Whether it's leading or simply unveiling what was already planned is a different conversation, which I think, quick side quest, to your point back after Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, why you wanted to get into more of a philosophical discussion based on Dick's work, because he provokes questions like this, right? Like, he's hopped up on drugs. He has these moments which inspire him to write these types of stories in an era that doesn't exist, like the microtransactions. That doesn't exist in 1969. That wouldn't happen until like 2010s, right? Like,
right.
Or like 2000. When did Farmville come out? Like, let's just use that as a marker, right? Like, because that was a moment when people were playing this game where they were like, oh, I need more cows and I need more carrots and wheat and whatever. And it's just like, you tell someone
2009.
Yeah, so 2008, 2009. Farmville, and they're like, oh man, I remember that. But now every app has microtransactions.
Okay, we can go down there for a little bit. As somebody who believes in the supernatural, I think no matter how far we advance, the world will look quite like it looked 1,000 years ago. Now, horse and buggies will be replaced by Model T Fords, then by Buick LaSalles, and then by Hyundai Genesis, and whatever the hell comes in the next 100 years, right? But essentially, the world will look the same. Humans will think and operate the same at a meta level, because obviously cultures change, ideas change, worldviews evolve. I'm not trying to downplay or oversimplify this, but essentially the world will be the same. Even if we achieve space flight and everything that Philip K. Dick describes in UBIK, people are the same. They're spiritual beings. Just because we're no longer sacrificing humans on altars and playing a primitive version of soccer with their heads doesn't mean we're not spiritual beings looking for answers and looking for ways to access those things beyond the veil. That will always happen, and it will look different. You're going to have to stop me and redirect me if I'm not answering your question, because I don't think I am. That's more like a preamble to an answer.
It's a fine preamble. The question, put more simply, is do you believe that there's a spirit of the age that knows the direction that technology is quote unquote meant to go in, or technology that is going to be revealed later that isn't yet, that people can tap into, I guess, through the use of drugs?
I'm going to answer this very carefully because I think it's imperative that I'm precise. I think the spirit of the age, as you call it, does not have the ability to look 10,000 years into the future. That's something that only God can do. Whatever this spirit of the age is, collectively speaking, as humanity, or things that are accessed by people playing around with shit they shouldn't be playing around with, I don't think they're looking down the corridor of time and making any sort of chess moves. I think as things progress, people can make safe assumptions, safe guesses about, well, what's next after this technology? What's next after this technology? That's why Philip K. Dick can probably imagine certain things, because he was looking at what was going on around him in the same way, only maybe with a little bit more amplified. That spirit of the age can sense what's going on and maybe amplify or coerce, manipulate those people who are more prone to coercion and manipulation. That, I believe, can happen. As somebody who believes in the supernatural and, a clear distinction between good and evil and all that stuff. That's my answer. That's the best I can give you.
I think it's a good answer. I would actually do a retcon and redefinition, not just people who use drugs, but honestly people who use anything that lets them, as you said, peer behind the veil.
Right. Absolutely. Doesn't have to be drugs.
Could be a Ouija board, could be drugs, could be Wiccan magic, could be whatever.
Right. Because the world hasn't changed from the time of our forefather Abraham. Now, it's changed in some ways. If you take Abraham and plop him down in the middle of Chicago, he might have a heart attack. If you take
He'll just ask you where his sheep are. Where are my sheep?
Like, where's Sarah? My sister. I mean, my wife.
Yeah.
If you take you and me and you put us in the middle of Abraham's tent, his camp, right before he goes after Lot, we'd probably be freaked out, right? We'll be freaked out. But the world and people generally are the same. We want to worship. We always want to peer behind that veil. That's why spirituality and astral projection and aliens and rocks and astrology and all this stuff. And I'm focusing on that because that's what secular people do. They'll never consider Buddhism in its true form. They'll consider a whitewashed version from, Guru Jeff from down the street. And they'll never consider anything meaningful from Islam. They'll have some watered down, whitewashed version of Islam. And these people, by doing these things, by playing these games, if you will, they're trying the same thing that the pagans were doing in Abraham's time. It's just a different world, a different feel, the same candy, different wrapper. People will use drugs or Ouija boards and all the other things you said just because we're humans. That's just par for the course for our race. I think.
Okay, let's drive this side quest back toward the story. I thought this was super interesting, which is...
I think so too.
It helps me understand a little bit more why you love PKD the way that you do, because it provokes questions like these, right?
Right.
Bring us back to the story because you're the resident expert on this one.
So we have Runsitter and Associates, and what sets up the pivotal, moment in the book is Runsitter and his associates going to Luna, which is the moon, because we've colonized the moon, and falling into a trap where their bomb goes off. And that sets everything into motion. Because now we don't know, and by the time you get into chapter 12 and 13, you'll really be confused as to who's dead and who's alive.
Based on chapter 9, that doesn't surprise me.
No, and that's why I don't think I'm spoiling it for you, because at 9 and 10 where you're at, that just gets more clear, which is a funny way of me saying things will become less clear.
Yeah. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't know who set this trap yet, right?
Not yet,
okay.
No.
All right, no.
We think it might be Hollis, who is...
I don't think it is. I know that's what we're led to believe, but I don't think that's true.
Okay.
Seems...
Fair enough.
If
seems
I know,
too easy?
It seems too easy, and also, based on storytelling, it's never the first person that you tell people it is. because that doesn't make the story interesting. There's no tension there.
Right now, in our conversation, we're in chapter 6. So Runsetter and the entire inertial team arrive on Luna and are shown their living quarters. But if we just jump a chapter back where Mrs. Wirt is setting them up to come to Luna, you should, and I want to get your reaction as a first-time reader, you should be looking at Mrs. Wirt going, oh, this sounds a little strange. As you are reading in chapter 5 and you were listening to Miss Wirt go on and on and on about her stuff, did you get any sense, this seems off?
I think I was too wrapped up in the question of, I guess I'd call it existential, precog, narrator, back and forth, well, she's not going to do this because of the precog, but he's going to do this because he's a precog and this back and forth, which distracted me from whatever she was up to. She did strike me as kind of a type A Karen of sorts, but again, I was distracted thinking through, well, how would you play chess with someone who could read the future? Because then it's I know that you know that I know that you know what you're going to do. So because I know that you know that I know that you know what you're going to do, I'm going to do this, but then you know that, so maybe I'll just make my first move?
Well, here's how funny the situation is. For all the reasons you just mentioned, I thought you would focus on her. I thought you would think that, this distraction, this thing that just came in, I thought that would grab your attention more than it did. So
that lines up with, I know that you know that I know that you know that something will stand out to me, but it's not what you thought.
Fair enough.
Certainly a unique book at this moment.
Yeah, it really is. So they're on Luna. The inertials realize the job is a trap and that Mick is really a bomb.
Why didn't they know earlier?
That is a good question. Why didn't 11 inertials, 11 team members, Joe Chip, who is supposed to find inertials, and he's been testing inertials, and he is a technician from Runsetter, who's supposedly been running a company for 60 years. Yeah, why didn't they know? They realized too late, so the bomb goes off.
I bet you that they're all trapped inside their own moratoriums, and this is just like a recycled dream that they just keep playing.
Oh, you beautiful bastard, you. So that's a theory. Number one, that's possibility. It's a theory. Number 2, dreams. Let's go down this side quest. I'm so glad you said it. On this read through, this book felt to me like a dream, as if it was a dream. If I go back to my dreams that I sort of remember, and my dreams are always very lucid, very vivid. I smell things in my dreams. I hear things in my dreams. I'm able to speak and what I think is control my speech and control my actions. That's probably not true. It's probably just a trick of my brain when I'm sleeping. But I have very lucid and vivid dreams. They're always freaking weird. Like the dream I told you I had about you. We were organizing a room and it was vivid. Like I saw things we were putting away. Then us driving down the road that I remember from movies. It was in California that goes along the coast.
Route 1?
I think so.
Highway 1 or whatever.
And this book, as I'm reading it, now that I'm almost finishing it, it feels like a dream because they're going to the moon, they're talking, there's a bomb that goes off, but it's a guy. Then there's this dead guy, and then they're getting off the moon. Then they're in Maryland, they're burying the guy. There's a TV show that's playing, and I'm jumping around all over the place, and I'm not going to spoil everything because you haven't read exactly what I'm talking about, but there's a TV show that's talking about a funeral, and then the TV turns on and TV turns off, and Joe Chip picks up a phone and hears Runsetter's voice.
That happened already.
Did it?
The TV thing where Runsetter's talking to him, because I started chapter 10, that's happened as well. And then like the epigraphs in the beginning of each chapter, which feels like just advertisements.
They are 1950s advertisements.
Yeah.
And there's supposedly some kind of message in them, not like a secret message from beyond the veil, but a message in them to help you better understand what's going on in the book. I haven't figured that out yet, though.
Your research didn't lead you to that?
No. I didn't want to spoil it for myself, but I just saw that in a Reddit thread.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Can we just pause? You didn't want to
son of a bitch.
spoil it for yourself? I'm going to quote you on that.
I wanted to figure it out on my own.
No. I'm going to quote you on that, and I'm going to hold you to that for things like, I don't know, I'll just draw something
Words
out of
of
the hat.
Radiance?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was going to say Stormlight
Okay.
Archives.
Son of a bitch. Okay. So I saw that in a Reddit thread, and I just didn't click on it. Like, nope, not doing this. Because I wanted to re-listen to the epigraphs or the advertisements and figure out for myself. But back to the point. This whole book feels like a dream for the reasons I just mentioned. The jumping around the narratives, the weird stuff that's happening, this sort of kind of like you're in a fog. Each little vignette seems so ephemeral, right? It's there, and then it just disappears. And then you're in a new thing, and then cigarettes are old, and Al is dying in the bathroom. Or you think he's dying, but he's not dying. But he's getting very, very tired. Joe Chip drives to an airport, and when he tries to buy a ticket with his car, the car turns into something else within like 10 minutes of in-book time. So all these things feel to me like the whole book is a dream. Everything moves as slowly as it does in a dream. Mm-hmm. You might switch places in a dream. You might switch perspectives in a dream. But in reality, at least in my dreams, I know there's almost 8 billion people in the world, so there's probably 8 billion dreams. But in my dreams, things tend to move at a very slow, methodical pace. So there's some things in this book that are very methodical. They're talking, they're discussing, they're showing each other money, they're trying to figure out what's going on, they're trying to make a phone call, they're figuring out what to do with Runsitter at the moratorium. And then there's just this quick cut and you're somewhere else. So anyway, I'm glad you said something about dreams, because for me this was like a revelation today. I was working out and listening to this book, and I'm like, man, this really feels like a dream to me.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So we have a bomb. Runsitter is probably dead. Joe, which you think is wrong, thinks that Hollis, Runsitter's chief adversary, is naturally responsible for orchestrating the trap.
What has Joe gotten right so far? Let me tell you that. Let's just...
Not a lot.
Okay, so... Not
a lot.
That's why I don't really trust him.
To your credit, rarely is the most obvious solution the correct one in Dick's novels.
Well, and I mean, can you... quick side quest. Is there a novel that is beyond young adult books? So like regular books, I guess? Basically books that are not for children.
No.
That has, hey, it might be Colonel Mustard in the billiard room with the candlestick. Let's keep looking and find out. I don't know of any. Doesn't mean there aren't any, which could be a really interesting plot device for someone to use to go, oh, it's probably Colonel Mustard in the billiard room with a candlestick. And then they go around and find everything else. And they're like, it was Colonel Miss. You know, and I think Scooby-Doo actually does this.
Okay. Well played.
Never mind.
The next thing I want to talk about is in chapter 7. So it's the next chapter. Objects around them, meaning Joe and Al, in the moratorium, appear to revert to their older forms. The characters are aging rapidly, and this seems to suggest, even though the technological advancements of the characters present are troubling and even dehumanizing, they belong in their own era, right? These characters are in a particular era, and they have a particular set of technologies. That's a little clunky, but we're going to go with it. So the micro transactional door, the vid phones, the flying cars, the flying spaceships, which obviously they'll be flying, as they're reverting back to a different time, they're also being ruined alongside it. So it's not like they're being transplanted somewhere, but they themselves are also deteriorating just as the stuff around them is deteriorating. And as this is happening, something out of the blue, out of the ordinary, something weird is going on. They start hearing a song being played on the speakerphones. in Chapter 7. The song is being sung in Latin, which is an antiquated language, especially in the future of 1992. It was in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
I translated some of the lyrics. So I'm going to read you 2 sentences of the lyrics. I think that's all that's given to us. I couldn't find anything else in the Kindle book.
Mm-hmm.
The trumpet spreading a strange sound through the grays of the regions will force all before the throne. Death will be astonished, and nature, when the creature will rise again, will answer to the judge.
Read it again.
The trumpet spreading a strange sound through the graves of the regions will force all before the throne. Then there's the whole scene of Joe and Al talking, and then the last lyric that Joe hears is, death will be astonished, and nature, when the creature will rise again, will answer to the judge. Very cryptic, esoteric, very theological, very almost Christian, and some
I was
sense.
thinking that. Yeah.
I don't know if you probably didn't catch it because you would have told me about it before I told you about it if this stood out to you.
I mean, I noticed it, but it didn't draw enough of my attention to speak about it because, again, I only say again because we talked about this in, I think it was actually, we talked about this. There's so much going on that on a first read through, you can only catch so much, right? It's like if you're going to first grade and they're teaching you about addition, words, and spelling. And you're like, whoa, I don't know how to do any of this stuff. There's so much information being thrown at you in a story, especially one by PKD here, discussing alternative universes, basically, that you can only pick up so many things. So, no, it was not a priority item that stood out to me. All that to say.
You did notice the tape recorder, though, right?
Yes, how things are going forward and backward, and yeah. All that to say, it didn't stand out to me as a priority item. But we are coming up to the end of the episode here, and there's a lot more, I'm sure, to uncover in the next 8 chapters for me to discover as well. And I just want to make one more note as we're closing here that if you dive into reading this, I actually think that this episode, even though it has a couple spoilers, is a really good precursor to it because I didn't have all this information before I started. I was just like, hey, we agreed to read this book on our schedule, so let's just dive in. But chapter 9 is a pretty good turning point where you start to get context for why you should care. And that has helped me to double down on the buy-in, I would say. And again, to my point, because I want to reiterate this strikes me as a book that is better the second and third time through because you have a better understanding. You can slow down and digest it a little more mentally of the different nuances that PKD puts in the book, which I think you just don't have the capability of doing because there's just too much going on. Now, maybe I'm just an average human and I can't take it in and you can. And if that's the case, good on you. It's not the case for me. So
I think that's just a matter of preference, not necessarily a matter of intelligence. Because there's plenty of books that I could probably understand, but I'm not interested in.
You mean like The City and the City?
I was waiting for that, but yeah.
I wanted to save it for the end.
No, I got you. So there's probably books out there, I'm talking about literature, that might have complex themes and discuss very esoteric, lofty ideas. And even though I might like those things and understand those things and be able to absorb what the author's trying to tell me, I might find the author boring or I might find the story just And I don't think it's you being average or not average. It's just, I don't think this is your cup of tea as much as you like it and you appreciate it.
I'm certainly new to it.
Yeah.
What'd you call it? Transgressive sci-fi?
Speculative.
What does transgressive even mean? I don't even know. What do you mean by that when you say that?
Chuck Palahniuk is transgressive, right? Because he pushes the boundaries. He talks about strange and weird and taboo things. And
for the culture of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so this could theoretically be transgressive for the 1960s, 70s.
It could, but if we're gonna
Okay.
be precise, this is speculative fiction because
Sure,
it
sure.
speculates what will happen if this technology is pushed to its logical conclusion, or what will happen if this sort of thing runs amok. Simple examples, but that's what speculative fiction is. It speculates. Transgressive can be speculative, but the way it's presented, it's not orthodox, if you will, or standard. But I'm going to leave us with a note I have in our episode outline. And I'm doing this because now that we've talked about dreams, which I was so glad that you brought that up. I think you brought that up initially. At least whatever you said sparked that conversation in me.
Really got you going. Baby, light my fire.
Whatever you said sparked that conversation about dreams because I was thinking about it this morning. So here's a note. Given the importance of dreams to the narrative, another interpretation is that every character is alive and dreaming. Readers may recall, too, that the first time the novel introduces Joe Chip, he is in a state of recovery after a night of drug use. Maybe, then, the entire novel is Joe's hallucination, and UBIK exists as a temporary antidote to his state of altered perception. Yet one more explanation, maybe the most troubling of all, is that the entire world, as the characters know it, is a constructed simulation, something that PKD believed in. And their conception of God as UBIK, or UBIK as God, and Satan as Jory, or vice versa, are merely parts of that construct.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very Dickian.
Mm-hmm.
Par for the course for Phillip K. Dick. I've seen a few interviews with him, and I've seen him do a lecture. It is evident that he believed at least in the possibility of us living in some sort of computer construct. This idea of where the characters are. Are they in Half-Life? Are they dead? Is this a dream for them? We can discuss all those plot points next time when we start seeing their world come apart more than it is now.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you for joining us today, adventurers. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss out on the next side quest.